Well, welcome to this week's Newsmakers edition of WHUR at Home. I'm Bremante Bryant. Tonight, we will discuss the unrest sweeping our nation, the pandemic that's robbing many of our normal lives, and how all this is shaping our vote. My guest tonight is Melanie Campbell, President and CEO of the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation and convener of the Black Women's Round Table. Melanie Campbell, thank you so much for joining us. Hello, Melanie.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Still standing.
Still standing? Mm-hmm. Well, look, it is election day in D.C. and Maryland. Have you heard about any concerns or issues tonight? The polls are pretty much, I think they just closed about 20 minutes ago.
Yeah. I think the main thing that I've heard, and I've been hearing that even before election day, is that because election day was moved, and because you're having so many people who are trying to vote by mail, that some people didn't get their ballots, so they're having to just go and go to the polls anyway. That's been the main thing, so I do know some people, even personally, who didn't get their ballots, who had to go ahead and just go to the polling place. And I think the biggest thing is just people are having to vote in such an unprecedented time when we are already dealing with coronavirus, and just the reality is if you go, having to worry about. I think that Maryland and DC and other places have done a good job. Even as I was talking to folks in Pennsylvania that I know, our folks who are organizing there, that people found ways for people to try to be as safe as possible to take those ballots, not have to get out of your car and things like that. So it gives us kind of a dry run for what we'll be looking at in November, on top of the fact that we're dealing with civil unrest, social protest, and just depending on where you are, what street you got to go to, you don't have as many polling places. So it's a lot of challenge, but I think in the same moment, it's very crystal clear that folks know why we need to vote.
Do you think that civil unrest will suppress the vote for the simple reason, one, as you mentioned, that you may be fearful of going out, and two, your attention may be on that and not so much on voting? I could really see people literally forgetting, like, oh, today we're supposed to vote, or I'm supposed to put that in the mail.
I don't think that the current occupant of the White House is going to make it for folks to forget why we need to vote. I'm not positive, but I only can say it the way I say it. I think that he's reminding a whole lot of young people how important their vote is, too. Because we've got a lot of high school students going to the polls. I'm not going to the polls, but going out here in the protests. And I know a lot of our, like all of young people who work for me, all of them been going out there. And it's a new movement moment that has so many layers to it.
I think that's the interesting thing, that some might be thinking that the president in particular, the walking across Pennsylvania Avenue in front of the church, and that was about a signal to his base, right? To sort of get them revved up, to get them to come out to vote. And so since we're talking about voting and it's election day, at least in Maryland and DC, primary elections, in a way, does President Trump play a role, as you mentioned, in inspiring both sides to vote by his overt actions?
I think his actions, first of all, I think his actions are deplorable. I'm just going to say that. I have a right to say that as a voter myself.
Okay.
That we're living in a moment that the kind of fascist tendencies he's had. One day, another day he wants to be a dictator. Another day he wants to be. It's a really trying moment in time, and it's been that way since for 4 years, basically. During the elections, all the things that have happened. And so we're going to even get down to the reality that we also know that Russia is still trying to influence the results of this election. So we've got a lot going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot going on, but also having worked on Black participation, voter participation, civic engagement for 30 years now. There are times where people don't realize there's voting going on, or I think people are really aware.
Mm-hmm.
But we're all faced, especially African Americans, we're faced with some really hard choices because coronavirus has such an adverse impact on us, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think but in the same vein, people are taking that risk to go out on the streets to protest, to peacefully protest, to resist, and to call for justice for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and so many others who have been killed by the police or vigilantes. And so I think that the issues around justice and injustice and racism in this country, because we've been brought over here on slave ships. Police weren't ever put there to be able to protect and serve. And I have a lot of friends of the police, right? The history of policing in this country for us as Black folks has never been one of positive, although I know a whole lot of police that are good people, including relatives, right? Mm-hmm. So, we live in a system and we help build this country, so it's our country too, right? So, but yeah, it's challenging.
Yeah. Now you're coming at this from a lot of different angles, right? You are an experienced organizer. You are African American. You are a woman, and those last two, I mean, they are in the top of the headlines right now, especially when we're in the presidential election, right? Mm-hmm. And now we have Joe Biden who says, I will pick a woman. And now is there pressure for him to pick an African American woman?
Well,
talk about the power. Again, what's that?
On a personal level, definitely I've been on part of those voices and really encouraging him to do that. I think it would be
mm-hmm. And if he doesn't, will there be repercussions? Or if he doesn't, does he have to explain it to African American voters in a way where they can digest it and say, okay, as long as you have policies that address the African American community, we can take Elizabeth Warren. We can take, I don't think Amy Klobuchar is kind of in the running anymore, especially after what's happened in Minnesota and her record coming through. But can African Americans take him choosing a non-African American woman if his policies can align to what the African American community wants?
Anything is possible. I would say that if ever there was a expanded reason to choose an African American woman, I think what we're dealing with now with this unrest is it further elevates the need for diversity in this country, right? Mm-hmm. And the fact that yes, we've had one African American man, right, out of all the other persons, right? So now, and for Black women who are not just super voters, mm-hmm. right, but we're leaders, and have been loyal to this party, and so we have helped get a whole lot of white people elected, primarily white men. Mm-hmm. So we are not against anybody. We are affirming that Black women are ready to lead and already leading in so many ways. Mm-hmm. And also, yes, it's expected of him, regardless, to have a platform and policies that address the concerns of African Americans, Black folks from all backgrounds, because that's how Democrats win. They don't win by a majority white vote. They win by a majority Black vote. And mm-hmm. they win, and if you look as far back as Jimmy Carter, I'll just go that far back, right? Yep. Mm-hmm. There is no majority white vote. It was the mix of Black folks and other people of color, the few white folks, to get a Democrat elected to the White House.
If you are afraid, if you're not used to doing the mail-in ballot. I don't know. I think I may have done it once, like 20 years ago, when I lived in Delaware, and even then I wasn't sure what I was doing. And I did my mail-in ballot this year in Maryland, and like you had mentioned, it was easy peasy. I drove up to the ballot box. I was so intent on it getting in, I didn't even want to put it in the mail. I drove up to the ballot box.
A lot of people do that, yeah.
Yeah, because let me put it in this box. But do you think
disappear?
Yeah, well, in this environment, if you're used to, like I am, walking up to the polls and voting, could mail-in voting in a way scare people from voting to the point, separate from President Trump and what he's been saying? If you're not used to that, what to do? I have to sign the back. Did I remember to sign the back? Is that a concern to try to, people?
I think to change your behavior of it's once consistent is always a challenge. But we've also never been faced with so many other external barriers for folks. And so we definitely, our organization, encourage folks to vote the way you choose, but definitely take a look at this, because if you had other fears, and you got to pick your fears too. In selecting this, it's nothing that I've experienced as being an organizer. So I say people have to just make that decision. We say make that decision on your own, but here are the options. Here are the options. That's what we've been doing with the census since March, when all this kind of blew up around the coronavirus. We've been pushing people to get counted in the census and encouraging, and we got a challenge because we're not returning though. We're not going online if we have access. We're not putting it in the mail. So that concerned me. And it's going to be, we're going to be definitely looking at how the turnout went in Maryland and DC, in Pennsylvania and other states. And next week, there are elections in Georgia and other places too. So there's several more states that have to vote. And we have to really look at what was the turnout and how folks, and then I think also because some states really put it in and sent the ballots and sent the returns, and that should, but we won't know till we can analyze it to really see how it actually turned out.
All right, now last few minutes, tell me about, or tell our audience a little bit about your organization that you work with and what it's all about.
Well, the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation, long name. Right, it's been around.
That's why I wanted you to say it.
Long name, yes. I said the National Coalition.
There you go.
But we are a civil rights organization. We focus on advocacy. We're 501c3. We focus on obviously voting and other kinds of major civic engagement activities. It's about building power, utilizing the vote, utilizing our leadership and collective power. As a coalition, we really believe in encouraging and trying to be a table, if you will, of organizations and leaders that work hard to maximize our resources. We focus also, we're the head of the Black Women's Roundtable, which is our women and girls arm of the organization. So we focus on issues of health and wellness and economic security, education, global empowerment. We have a youth-led program called Black Youth Vote that's led by young people who we do training them to be leaders for their generation, which is a peer-to-peer model that has worked over the decades. And so that's where we are. We're based in DC, and we work a lot in the South and a few other states and around the DMV.
And if folks want to get in touch with you or the organization, how would they do that?
Tell them to follow us. Probably the easiest way to find it. If they're on here, they're on social media, right?
We hope they're here.
Follow the National Coalition. So at NCBCP or National Coalition on Black Civic Participation on Facebook, at the National Coalition on Instagram. We're on Twitter at NCBCP. Or if you just say Melanie Campbell, you'll see and how you can be involved, and you can volunteer, and you can go to the website unitycampaign.org to see how you can volunteer and get involved, find out what we're doing, and we're just trying to do our part in the community to try to make a difference.
And that is what's needed. Melanie Campbell, thank you so much for
Thank you so much.
joining us tonight
Yes.
here on social media. She is the president and CEO of the National Coalition on Black Civil Participation and convener of the Black Women's Roundtable. Did I get all that in, Melanie?
You got it all in. And
Wasn't that good?
Thank you, and you be safe.
And thank you for joining us for this week's Newsmakers at HUR at Home. Remember, the November elections, as Melanie talked about, they are coming up. And one of the most powerful things we can do for ourselves, our families, and our future, vote.
Vote and be counted. We say do too. Vote and be counted.
Vote and be counted. Melanie has said it. She couldn't say it any better than I could. Thank you, Melanie. And we thank all of you out there for watching and listening. We appreciate it. We'll see you next time on HUR at Home. I'm Bremante Bryant. Take care.